Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
Welcome to the Huskies Hockey Podcast, Offseason edition, number 1. This is not Weldie, this is Andrew. I know you're already thrown off because we've switched host roles for this episode.
I like to call it a line change. We're making a line change here. We're switching it up, and this is what we got.
For those old-time fans of the Husky Hockey Podcast, you might remember the first version. I was in the host chair. I thought Weldie did a great job in the host chair for the reboot of the podcast, but for the off season, we want to switch some stuff up. So it might be me next month. It might be Weldie. We might flip flop for the summer months because these episodes are a little bit more freewheeling. We don't have games to discuss. We've got plenty of news to discuss this month.
Yeah, a month was quite a bit for us to kind of take some time off, or month and a half even. Because a lot of news came down the pipe. So, we're known for being very short and succinct with our answers. So we'll just rattle these through, right? Boom, boom, boom.
Yep. 20-minute podcast coming up. And please
we could have
that.
We could have a 20-minute discussion on some dumb rule change that may or may not even go into effect.
In the green room, we already did. So buckle up. But this is Andrew, along with Weldie. This is the Huskies Hockey Podcast, the world's number 1 podcast for St. Cloud State men's Huskies hockey news and NCHC. We take a look at the NCAA, college hockey. If you're a college hockey fan, and especially if you're a St. Cloud State Huskies hockey fan, you've come to the right place.
Or even if you just hate North Dakota.
There you go.
We welcome you.
Gopher haters. The enemy, or what is it? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So I don't know if that made sense, but
not in Dick
if you're
Tracy.
A hockey fan,
Dick Tracy, the enemy of my enemy is my enemy.
That's Weldie who comes with the movie references.
Dick Tracy's so good. I don't care. It's like a guilty pleasure movie for me. Yeah, it's a little rough around the edges, but God, they could do a pretty good Dick Tracy reboot. They should do a Dick Tracy reboot and a Carmen Sandiego. Like, you can do a good heist Carmen Sandiego movie. Cat and mouse. Oh, that'd be so good.
Do like a mashup. Kind of like an Alien Predator sort of thing. Put them both in the same movie.
I never even thought of that.
Maybe we just came up with our best idea of this entire podcast's history. It's possible.
I'll start writing the script right now.
You do that.
Stay tuned.
We're wearing fedoras right now in honor of Dick Tracy and Carmen Sandiego. But before we get too far afield into superhero movies, we can talk about some Huskies hockey news. Because, like I said, we've got plenty of that. The last time we spoke was, I think, right after the Frozen 4. So about a month and change ago. And it was at that time we did announce, it was actually after we recorded a little bonus mini episode, a reaction video, so to speak, audio only, about the Huskies getting part of their goaltender situation shored up for next year, bringing in Dominic Bassey from Colorado College. So go back to our previous episode if you want a full, deep, 20-minute dive on Bassey. But since then, a couple of other transfers have been brought into the St. Cloud fold. We've got Grant Cruikshank, also CC alum, spent his first 2 years with the Tigers, and then last year transferred to the Gophers. So this is his second transfer, and it'll be his third college team. I think bringing in some well-needed center depth for this team. Team is a little short-handed on centers, and it's Cruikshank's natural position. And it's a guy that hasn't been very prolific from a scoring standpoint in his career for the Gophers last year. 7 goals, 8 assists for 15 points. That was what, third line time for the Gophers. And put about, I don't know if he's had a 20-point season even with CC, but good good face-off guy, and I think a solid addition for the team. Could sort of turn into a Fitzgerald-esque type player. I don't know if he's going to put up the type of points that Fitzgerald did this past season, but I think a good veteran presence. And we mentioned this last week too with Miettinen, who took 0 penalty minutes for his second straight year. Cruikshank also no penalty minutes last year with the Gophers, and which is you don't like to take penalties, but I do like to have a little grit in my team. I don't.
True, but this is like you're just better at hiding it. So it's like you're cheating, but you don't get caught. I mean, this is it's pretty good.
I am not complaining about Cruikshank. Like I said, I don't think he's going to be your leading scorer next year, but I think he's going to be a very key member for this team. What's your thoughts on Grant Cruikshank?
I mean, like you said, the big thing is that he plays center, and that's where we're hit the hardest. So obviously Granilla, but I mean Saltquist, Spalacy, it's thin there, and so him coming in a little more, that veteran presence, face-off guy, like you said. I feel, and people can go ahead and double check this for me during after the show or whatnot, but it felt like he was always kind of a streaky player where, there would be some games he would just kind of take it over, and other games he'd just be invisible. I remember him having some really good games against St. Cloud State. So I'm probably actually putting him maybe on a little bit more of a pedestal. But maybe it's also because nobody on those CCC teams were very good. So he's the one that kind of stood out. So I thought I was happy to move. And I was under the impression that we were also kind of in the running for him when he decided to go to the Gophers. So him kind of circling back and say, come back and deciding that St. Cloud State is the place to finish off his career. It's, I'm happy to see it, and I'm happy to get a little bit of veteran center depth, which is always a good thing.
Yeah. Good skater. He's the son of Olympian Bonnie Blair, and you'll hear that about every game from Jim Rich next year. So be prepared to hear some Bonnie Blair stories. Speed skating legend, Bonnie Blair. So yeah, I agree that the center position is being shored up with this transfer, and I think he's going to bring some nice leadership. If he can pop in 20 points, even better. And then also another a transfer player that the Huskies acquired, Dylan Anhorn, defenseman from Union. He played at Union for the last 2 years, so he's going to be a junior. He's got 2 years left of eligibility for the Huskies. We should mention Cruikshank. This will be his final year. Actually, well, I'm not sure. They list him as a senior here on the Rink Live, but again, with that extra year of eligibility from the COVID year, he might have 2 years left, but I'm not sure. Plus, this is his second transfer. I don't know if because this might be his grad transfer. I'm not sure how he can do that. I still sort of, getting all the rules straight with the transfer situation, transfer portal. It's still kind of a new thing. So I think he's got 1 year left, but
I think he did 3 at Colorado College.
He did. Okay. Well, then, yeah. So this would be one more, his last year for St. Cloud. Anhorn, 2 years at Union, put up 20 points on the point. For Union, pretty impressive for a defenseman. Now, ECAC's been down for the last few years. Union, along with 7 other ECAC teams, sat out that 2020-2021 season. So he's got a year in between there that he did not play. So he's got 2 years left, but he seems like a guy, and I was not someone that was familiar with him. I watched a couple of Union games this year, but it's not like I can say that I was scouting Dylan Anhorn closely. But just the stat line is intriguing, and he's a guy that's going to be able to step in right away. We thought that defense wasn't necessarily a position or a position of great need for this Huskies team. It's a deep run of defensemen coming into this season, but adding a guy that's got some experience and is proven to have be a bit of an offensive touch, I think that's a good move. And wondering who this affects the most from the St. Cloud point position, as far as who's Anhorn taking time from. Again, we've got guys like Zemer from last year that were impressive in small doses, but just weren't able to crack the roster on a consistent basis. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this move, and if you are sort of worrying at who is kind of going to be on the short end of the stick from bringing a transfer defenseman in, if there is that. And I've also heard that the Weldies have a bit of a connection to the Anhorn family, and you can touch on that as well.
I mean, I would call it a connection. I mean, connection is implies that I know of even the family tree. But yes, my mother's maiden name is Anhorn, and she kind of went into a little bit of explanation about the Canadian Anhorns and a little bit of the family tree here that goes back. So we are probably related, and probably so far down the family tree that it doesn't even matter. So, but it'll be kind of cool to hear his name over the PA system, and be like, hey, that's my mom's maiden name. So that's kind of cool. And a unique name, not like, cool, you're an Olsen, there's a billion Olsens, so right. kind of a unique one. So that's a little bit of connection there. As far as the player, obviously, I haven't seen him play. Being a Union, what are they on ESPN Plus? Was ECAC, did that ESPN Plus, right?
So, sure.
So, but he played, I see here he only played 29 games, so I don't know if he was injured for a little bit of it or whatnot, but 20 points in 29 games is, another puck moving a defenseman, which you can't really have enough of. And you bring up an interesting point, is who gets bumped from this, and Trable, Bushy, Zemer, those are ones that probably are going to be kind of rotating in and out if Anhorn's going to get a little bit more of the playing time. So it's Anhorn, maybe he's with Meyer, Peart, but Lutke. I mean, these are some puck moving guys, and it's going to be kind of fun to watch the defense, and obviously we're going to need to with Bassey and now the new goaltender also that we have coming up with Gray. It's going to be defense is going to need to be a strong suit, and having the ability to kind of put in maybe some defensive first people like with tray ball and whatnot, or maybe if you want to go up and do a run and gun type with all the puck movers, having options is always a good thing.
Yeah, and you had mentioned James Gray. This is a fairly new commit in the last week or so. James Gray from Toronto is going to be coming in. It sounds like he's going to be coming in this fall. Goaltender. So, I mean, we talked last month thinking that Bassey and God, forgot his name already.
Castor.
My favorite goaltender, in-house goaltender, Jackson Castor. Figure that those guys are going to get a fair amount of work. Bassey, I would say maybe the slight edge as far as the favorite to be the main starter, but I would not be surprised if there was a split, a significant chunk of time for both Castor and Bassey. James Gray put up great numbers in juniors. Now he's playing in the OJHL, the Ontario Junior Hockey League, not to be confused with the Ontario Hockey League. This is, I think, what they call Junior A. whereas the Ontario Hockey League is major juniors. So this is the second tier Canadian junior league.
Like the AJHL or the BCHL, the same kind of level there.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, and I don't think it's on the level of the USHL, but probably something like the NAHL in the American junior leagues. And nothing wrong with NAHL goaltenders. Duluth seems to be cycling through those guys for like the last 7 years and winning national titles with NAHL type goaltenders. So
shout out, just quickly shout out to the St. Cloud Norsemen. I was just about to say punching their ticket, but I know people hate that phrase because there's no punching tickets. But they advanced to the Robertson Cup in Blaine. So good for the Norsemen.
Yes.
So
yes, the NAHL team from St. Cloud.
Yep. But yeah, for the NAHL, it's still a fairly strong league. And that second level in Canada, especially, that junior level, you still keep your college eligibility. Whereas in the major juniors, you're considered professional in the eyes of the NCAA for a majority of cases. Every once in a while, you hear of weird one-offs where they can play in both. But, I mean, that happens once every few years. But so it's, last season, 36 games, 1.96 goals against with a 9.31 save percentage. If you're in any type of reputable league and putting up those numbers, you're going to get some eyes on you. So I'm happy. Goaltending depth, obviously a need for pretty much everyone in the country. So I'm happy that I'm looking forward to seeing what he's got. 6'2", so he's not an incredibly big body, but a little bit on the bigger side. So we'll kind of. I've got my hopes up for him. I'll say that.
Well, yeah, and I mean, we might at this very early stage pencil him in as the third goalie on the depth chart, but I don't think this is a typical third goalie situation. I would not be surprised if Gray gets a couple of starts during the season, and of course, who knows about injuries too? He might be thrust into a starting position by necessity, more so by choice. But last year it was
quick prediction. I want a quick prediction from you right now. Who starts first, Castor or Gray?
Just between those two goalies?
Yep.
I would say Castor.
Okay.
I would say Bassey is going to get the majority of the starts next year.
I agree.
I'll go as far as to say that. It might be something like 16, 10, and 6. That's 32. It might be a split like that, where it's not, not like Rennick, where Rennick was doing 28 starts and Castor was doing 4 or 5.
I think Larson's going to learn his lesson not to do that.
And so last year you had Lamoureux, who was their third goaltender, and he just got into one game. I think played a period and a half against St. Thomas, and that was it. He transferred to Anchorage, I believe it was, one of the Alaskas. So barely used Lamoureux. He had a few starts in that COVID year. I know he started a game or two in the bubble in Omaha, but did not get hardly any time over this last season. But with this Gray coming in, would not be surprised if he gets a handful of starts next year, and who knows? He might Wally Pip the situation and turn out to steal a job. Who knows? I mean, he's still got this Isaac Posh at the USHL. Sounds like he's going to be back in the USHL for his last year of junior eligibility next year. And, struggled this year with Sioux Falls, but, he's a guy that had a little bit of hype coming into his commitment. So I'm sure he's going to get a good look if and when he does arrive on campus 2023. But keep an eye on this James Gray. I would not be shocked if he's a guy that emerges from the situation as a guy that gets more than just token look. So, and it's just, I was not even familiar with this OJHL. I had to kind of do some research on that league. I mean, we've plenty familiar with BCHL. A bunch of guys for the Huskies have come out of that league.
Although I don't know if I can name a team that isn't the Penticton V's from
that's
the BCHL.
True. I know it's the here I got the list. So I guess the Trail Smoke Eaters. I know I've heard of them just because of that name, and that's where Evan Bushy is right now. But if you gave me a few minutes, I might be able to scrounge some names of BCHL teams from the depths of my brain. But you're right, Penticton is kind of the juggernaut, and it's kind of because that's where I believe Fred Harbison is.
Yep,
who is a St. Cloud alum, and he's been coaching that team for a number of years. And so I think there is kind of a natural pipeline. That's where like Bennick did his juniors. So familiar with BCHL, but we've got even the AJHL and the MJHL from Manitoba and Alberta. Got a couple of commits coming in from those leagues. That's where I believe Kupka came from, one of those two leagues. So they're beginning to use the Canadian Junior A leagues a little bit more frequently for recruits, and I think it's I'm chalking it up to the Dave Shayak effect. Coming from Anchorage, where he was a coach for a number of years, I think his recruiting base was Canadian Junior A leagues, and he's the guy that it sounds like was in on this James Gray, getting him to commit. He's the guy that is credited with bringing Adam Ingram in, whose draft stock keeps rising, could be a late first-round draft pick this year in the NHL draft, lighting up the USHL for Youngstown this year. We've got guys that are looking at the commitments list here on the Rink Live. We've got a number of guys we've got 3 guys from Calgary on this list. Ethan Acoin, which I believe is coming in next year. He's in the AJHL right now. Tyson Gross is in the USHL. I think he's going to be coming in next year, not this coming year. But and this Anhorn also from Calgary, and I'm pretty sure that that Shayak was in on landing Anhorn in that transfer portal. So it's just it's a bit of a change. Motzko, occasionally brought in Canadian players. But not to the extent that it seems like we're seeing now. And like I said, when Mick Hatton will report on these commits, it seems like Shayak's name comes up a lot with these Canadian kids. So I'm excited to see how this takes them. And it's kind of interesting just to note the shift in where they're recruiting from. I mean, they still have a nice presence in the state of Minnesota. And I don't think that's not going to go away, but it's nice to be able to, and as you said, NAHL is a league that in the last 10 years has greatly increased its profile and its overall skill level. I think that you could say the same with these, AJHL, MJHL, and now the OJHL. It's nice to see that these leagues are now getting tapped into for serious NCAA prospects. I was looking that OJHL only had about 20 players or so that were currently committed to NCAA programs. A lot of them were committed to OHL programs. So it's like this is a stepping stone to go to major junior for a lot of players. I mean, obviously, most of them are Canadian born. And so the NCAA might not be their first, desired landing spot.
Mm-hmm.
But
and not only that, but like the exposure is because you're only exposed to, OHL and that major junior, and they've got such a stronghold there that, that's all people are going to talk about. I mean, so it's probably a little bit harder for these college teams to kind of come up and knock on their kids' doors and say, hey, let me tell you all the benefits about going to school.
Right. Yeah, and this is not the first OJHL commit they've had in the last few weeks, because they also landed Caleb Tyson, defenseman, who's playing for the Burlington Cougars of the OJHL. He won't be coming in this year. He'll probably be coming in next year, but that was also a recent commit. So 2 players from the same league here committing in a relatively short period of time. So it's like I said, just interesting to note the shifting sort of recruiting footprint. It's nice to know that St. Cloud is willing to go to places that I haven't even heard of before. That's like I said, this OJHL was not a league that was really on my radar. So congrats to James Gray on his commit, and also this Caleb Tyson that I just mentioned. And and all the others that we've mentioned. And like I said, I am excited to see what Gray. I'm intrigued by him because that's a sexy stat line. It's a stat line that I don't know how much I should put stock into that. You look at, I know that Kyler Kupka, he tore up that AJHL, the team that he was playing for a few years ago, and it's not like he's a star player for us. He's serviceable, but so sometimes you got to take the stats with a grain of salt. But I'm intrigued by those numbers, and just because that goaltending situation is such a question mark. Mm-hmm. It's three guys that all three, any of those three could emerge as by the end of the year next year as the clear number one. We just don't know at this point who that guy will be. So certainly interested to see how that all shakes out. And it's just nice to kind of see the next year's team come into focus. It's not 100% on all of these commits and which ones are going to come next year, but we're pretty sure that Adam Ingram, as I mentioned, is going to be coming in as probably the most hyped recruit. I think Grant Deshawn, Jack's brother, believe he's be coming in. He's been at the USHL level. I mentioned that Ethan Aucoin from Calgary, he's slated to come in. This Mason Reiners is an Edina kid, defenseman. He's ready to come as far as, I don't believe he has another year left of junior eligibility. So I think he's got to come in. Jack Rogers, an MJHL prospect, slated to be coming in. So, and I know there's some others that I'm forgetting, but you lost a fair amount of guys last year, and every year it seems like we're introducing ourselves to a new crop of commitments, and excited to see how this shakes out. And even guys like, we barely, I think at the very first podcast last year, we mentioned this Ryan Risebrough, and did not get any playing time last year. Interesting if those kind of guys get a shot this year, and what they do with it. So nice to know that that next year's team is slowly coming into focus, mm-hmm. but keep an eye on that.
One person that I don't know if he said was, did you say Max Montez?
I did not.
Okay, from he plays at Dubuque,
yep.
The USHL. But it sounds like, my sources tell me, I know a guy who knows a guy who says the plan is probably for him to stay another year at the USHL. So, but 32
points,
32
yep.
points in 60 games. So it's
18 years old here, according to Mick Hatton's sheet. So yeah, he's still got some time left in the juniors if he wants it. So yeah, I would not be surprised if he stays another year in juniors. But yeah, there's some good prospects on this list, and it's one thing to read stat lines on a website. It's another thing to see them in person. So
yeah, and that's I think so far with this, I'm pretty happy with how things are shaping up with the Brett Larson and how he's recruiting. And, this is starting to get to be the time where he's, the whole team is going to be pretty much his go-to and his guys versus, a couple, that were kind of holdovers from Motzko and whatnot. So it's going to, and, seeing these commits kind of line up, it makes me intriguing, or it makes me excited for it. Shayak, it's, like you said with the Canadian aspect of it, that's intriguing to see. Obviously, it was very hard for him to recruit to Alaska Anchorage, so it's. But to see him work his connections and whatnot, I'm pretty excited to how everything has unfolded so far.
Indeed, and of course with that recruiting, mentioning Larson and Shayak and another guy that's obviously involved in the recruiting process, or has been, I should say, was Nick Oliver. And I say was because there was some news regarding him, and congratulations to Nick as he was hired as the new head coach of the Fargo Force of the USHL, which I believe he played for himself when he was coming up. But he'll be the head coach for the USHL Fargo Force, which leaves an opening on the bench for St. Cloud as another assistant coach. Nothing announced yet as far as a replacement for Oliver. Last year during the Olympics when Larson was in Beijing, they did promote this RJ Enga, former CC assistant who had been there. I think his title is like video coordinator. But he's like their assistant coach. He's in the press box during the game. They promoted him to behind the bench when Larson was in China. My bet, and I have no inside information, is that they just promote him as a assistant for this coming year. Be kind of an easy move to do that. You'd still then have to hire a video guy. There is still going to be an opening. I would not be surprised if they go outside the current organization, so to speak, and find a replacement for Oliver from outside. You still have 5 months, less than 5 months until the season starts, and they are looking. The job has been posted, so someone will be in that capacity. We just don't know who that is. And so another, it's a good problem to have as far as you like to see that your assistants that you're hiring that end up getting jobs like Oliver did. I mean, we're going to talk about Garrett Raboyne in a little bit as he was named the Augustana head coach. But, I mean, Nick Oliver is taking a path right now that I would not be shocked if he becomes an NCAA head coach someday. This is kind of a first big step in that path, climbing that ladder, so to speak. So
he was the assistant at Sioux Falls beforehand, before getting the job here for the assistant at NCAA. So getting some head coaching now, experience for Fargo for a few years. And yeah, like you said, it wouldn't be surprising if he gets a couple of looks here. I would say within the next 4 or 5 years or so for an NCAA job.
Who knows? He might be a future St. Cloud State head coach, 10 years from now. Who knows? Sandelin retires at Duluth. Larson goes back to his alma mater, and then Oliver goes to St. Cloud. This could be the 2035 podcast that we're talking about. But I will set a reminder in my phone to double check on that prediction in 2035 and see if that comes true. As Brett Larson is trying to continue the streak of 7 straight national titles for Duluth at that point, because that's when Sandelin's going to retire once they hit the 7th straight natty. He's gonna be like, that's it. I'm out. And then Brett's got to go in there to try to keep the streak going. But I will have to say, I know people have been asking me on Twitter all the time about whether or not I applied for the assistant coach job of St. Cloud State. I did apply, and my resume got returned, which is kind of bizarre. It just said, nope, we're good. And I was like, hey, I could pick up cones. Like I could do something for the team. And they're like, we're good. We've heard your podcast. Yeah, that's the damnedest thing. They don't know what they're missing out. They don't know what they're missing out on. I'm rarely wrong. So yes. But in all seriousness, congratulations to Nick Oliver. And do you have any your insiders? You've mentioned the little birdies that are in contact with you. You got any inside info on the St. Cloud State vacant head coach or assistant coaching opportunity other than Weldie? Other than me, which in my head, I'm still the front runner. I would say I don't have any inside information, but it's one of those things. Like if I recalled for when Oliver was hired as the assistant coach, it was one of those things that was like an open secret. He was at all the meetings and whatnot, but St. Cloud didn't announce it until, a month before the season or something like that. So there might be something to it where we'll probably hear a lot of whispers before we'll actually get confirmation from it. And sure, maybe this is a good time to transition as well to who is going to announce who our new assistant coach is, because now our athletic director, big congratulations to Heather Weems, who is holding up the mantle or holding up the mantle, continuing the mantle. I don't know what the assuming the mantle that was left by Fenton. So at the commissioner of the NCHC. So congratulations to her. Yes, and have you put in your resume for the AD position? Because this is another one that you were passed up for the NCHC commissioner as well. I mean, we're just striking out here left and right.
I wouldn't say that I'm striking out, is that I am learning about what these people want. So I am adjusting my resume, fine-tuning everything. And one of these jobs is going to hit. You know, I'll still be able to throw spaghetti at the wall, see if it sticks. But you know, who knows? You know, obviously, Heather has done a lot for St. Cloud State when it comes to hockey. But you know, even more so, like we've had a lot of programs here at St. Cloud State has had a lot of success. As of late, we've had baseball has had some very good runs here. Obviously, our wrestling program at Division II has been top notch for years. And so it's she's done a lot for that athletic department. They've had a lot of success under her, and it's cool to see one of our own kind of get promoted up and to that job. And it's not going to be an easy job, that's for sure. I mean, I applied for it, obviously, but it's not a job that I would necessarily love to have.
Yes.
I was okay being passed up on the commissioner job. I was like, okay, fine.
Yeah, I think we mentioned
assistant coach one still stings.
Yes. Yeah, you're better with cones than national TV contracts.
Yes,
that's a little far field of your skill set.
Or handling referees and all of that. So
talking to Dave Starman.
Yes. But also, I did also throw my hat into the ring for the open public address announcer job. So
there you go.
I mean that auditions are coming in through the end of May. It's just a Google form, just virtual auditions. Don't apply because you're going to lose to me, obviously. So with my
are you practicing?
Tones,
you practicing your woos? It's like doing diaphragm exercises and breathing and just woo. Yeah, that's the key here.
Yeah. That's the key, and I don't know if I could top that. Actually, I think that should just be on loop.
Just
there
clip that out and then submit that as my. I could travel. You could fly me in each weekend, and I could do that. Yeah, I mean, we had mentioned when Fenton announced his departure of the league. A few months ago, we discussed kind of what the future of that position holds, not knowing that Weems would be the person to replace him. But I think the big thing for the commissioner, I mean, a lot of the stuff Fenton kind of took care of for a while. I mean, we've got the XL locked into place for the next 4 years, 3-4 years at least.
Yep.
For the conference tournament. So that's kind of taken care of. And it's a tournament that I think is starting to sort of settle in. I mean, they had first few years at Target Center, and now it's at the X, which I think most fans prefer the X to the Target Center, although I don't think the Target Center was that bad of an experiment. But it seems like they've kind of settled in to their conference tournament there, and as other conferences, replace a neutral site conference tournament, the NCHC is at least, committing to that format, whereas other leagues are giving it up. And, it's not the old Final Five, but it's tough to ever have that again, I think, at a neutral site. So,
and also people need to remember too, it wasn't a snap your fingers and it was 19,000 people at a Final Five game. It took a long time for that to get going.
That's right. And so that's kind of taken care of for the near future. You still got the CBS Sports Network deal, and you've got NCHC TV, which was infrastructure of the league that was put into place under Fenton's watch that Weems will be inheriting. The big thing that she's going to be shepherding the league over, I think, is another round of potential realignment, adding teams to the league potentially. Yeah. I think that we're sitting on some sort of domino effect with, we've got a couple of new teams in the mix. What to do with Arizona State? now that they have their new shiny facility ready to open in the fall. Very possible. We've heard the rumors about Mankato, Arizona State, Bemidji. What is Miami and Western happy? And so I think in the next 5 years, there's going to be some serious decision making as far as do you want to take the league to 10 teams, or is there going to be a replacement of a couple of teams for a couple of others? That's I think going to be the big thing for Weems to handle as commissioner. As you said, I think she did a good job at St. Cloud. I mean, as far as from a men's hockey standpoint, I'd say her biggest hire at this point was the Brett Larson hire, and so far so good with that. One thing that I just thought about, and I remember in our green room before we went to air here, I knew I was forgetting something, and now with Weems, thinking about Weems, the thing that I was forgetting is that St. Cloud's about to hire a women's coach. They've announced 3 finalists for the women's job. And I'm wondering if Weems is not going to make that decision now. It's possible that she doesn't start the commissioner position for a little bit, and she's actually going to be the one to make this hire. Seems like that's weird, because I know that they had these 3 candidates in for kind of interviews with the general public, because they had them available at the Husky Den, talking to stakeholders over the week. And I would assume that position was going to be the next head coach was going to be announced within the next week or two. I'm just wondering now, with Weems gone, if that throws a wrench into the plans. But yeah, so I'm not sure if like I said, I just thought about that kind of on the fly here. I know that the 3 candidates, Brian Adulski, former North Dakota coach, who I think would be a great hire for the position. We've also got, I'm going off the top of my head here, they have a UW Eau Claire coach, Strand is his last name. And then there's a Wisconsin assistant coach, Molly, and I'm not sure what her last name is. But there's the 3 candidates. Again, I'm not very well versed on this, as you can tell, but kind of a last minute in this story of replacing the women's coach. Without Weems there, I'm not sure if that's going to delay that announcement or not. But there's we can't forget about, obviously we can't forget about the women's team, but also the AD position at St. Cloud. You're managing all kinds of sports. You mentioned wrestling and baseball, two of the program's teams that have been making headlines of late. But there's a whole lot more to the job than just men's ice hockey. So whoever they hire,
like you talked about women's hockey, but also men's basketball as well. We just fired Reimers there, so it's she might not be making those decisions.
Yeah, I'm not sure. From what I read from when she was announced as the NCHC commissioner, from what I gathered, that position starts immediately. So I'm intrigued to see what happens with that women's hire. But again, congratulations to Heather Weems for that position, and excited to see how she handles the near future here of that conference, and wish her the best of luck. As far as the other coaching changes, we had mentioned Garrett Raboyne announced as Augustana's first head coach in their program history. They begin play next year in a brand new facility that is in the process of being constructed. And so Raboyne is going to have the opportunity to be not just a head coach, but sort of an architect of a program, building it from scratch, bringing in a recruiting class from 0 to 20 plus, and he's got a year head start in that effort. And so this will make Raboyne now is the third St. Cloud State alum currently coaching in NCAA. I wonder, that's got to be near the top of programs as far as their head coaching. You got Bob Motzko, of course, at the University of Minnesota. Mike Hastings as well, for the trivia question there, also a St. Cloud State grad. He's obviously at Mankato. So Reboyne is the third Husky alum currently with the NCAA coaching job. As you said, he's taken that he did not have head coaching USHL experience. I do not believe. So it's not exactly the same path that Oliver seems to be staking out here, but pretty much after he graduated from St. Cloud as a player, I think he played a year or so in Europe, but then shortly thereafter returned and was sort of the Nick Oliver of his era in St. Cloud, as being one of Motzko's recruits in St. Cloud, and then followed Motzko to the Gophers. And as it sounds, I mean, very important in their recruiting the last few years for the Gophers. And you sort of have a theory that we've had some announcements of Gophers decommitting since the announcement of Reboyne taking that job. And are they related? I wouldn't be shocked if they were. Seems like he's a really likable guy. And again, congratulations to Garrett getting that job, and best of success for a program. It's a very intriguing one. It'd be the first program in South Dakota. So it's a expansion of college hockey's footprint into a new state. Sioux Falls, which is where Augustana is, they've been hosting some regionals in the last few years. So they're growing as a presence of NCAA hockey, and having a program right there will only improve sort of the interest of college hockey in that area. So excited to see what he'll be able to do. I would not be surprised if Augustana, kind of like St. Thomas this last year, would not be surprised, given the connections between Reboyne and St. Cloud, that St. Cloud is going to be one of those first opponents that Augustana plays when they do start up next year in 2023. Anything to add on Garrett Reboyne to the Vikings of Augustana?
No, I mean, you pretty much hit everything. It was, him, having, no head coaching experience and getting that job. You could tell that he has that confidence, or I would say that people-pleasing mentality. He seems like he would be very much kind of a player's coach, who, somebody that, you could approach and talk to about anything at any time. I think that kind of goes a long way in teaching some of the newer blood that's coming up. That hard line approach, I don't think really works in this day and age. And I think that's maybe what happened with Bob. And my theory just kind of goes back to, first and foremost, I think assistant coaches deserve more credit, and to that extent also deserve a little bit more blame. But at the same time, it's like, I feel that they don't get nearly enough love. It's all about, the head coach. They hires the staff for the assistant, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there's just a lot of, different things that the assistant coach does that is very similar to everything else that a head coach does, just in different facets. And, just how I've heard, just how I pictured when Motzko was here. Obviously he's always going to stick up for his players, but, Motzko was very much in that Herb Brooks mold, where it was, this is how I want you to play. This is what I want you to do. If you don't, you're riding the bench. I remember it was like, Nicholas Ryu, I think, like he played like early, he played pretty good minutes one year, and then he played like one game early the next year, and then like nothing else. Like the rest of the season didn't even touch the ice. And I just picture him as being that hard approach and wearing some people thin. So you go to the people person, and that Reboyne was kind of that counterweight, and they kind of gets into that a little bit in Miracle when it comes to Kirkpatrick and whatnot with Herb Brooks. But obviously this is all theory, and I'm not here to bash Motzko for something that I know absolutely nothing about. I clearly never played for him, but it's something where I think that there might be something into it, because there was a lot of people either decommitting or transferring out of Minnesota after after that news, and could be a coincidence. And also, what the smaller Lucius brother? I mean, he committed when he was like 12. I think he committed under Doug Woog, for crying out loud. But so I mean, it's another one of those 13, 14-year-old commits that were kind of all in the rage that clearly doesn't pan out. But I don't know. It's just that's kind of always what I thought about when it comes to assistant coaches. That I think they're the man behind the curtain, so to speak, and they're kind of the glue that keeps everything together. And that's why they're always in the mold to become head coaches, because of all the work that they do.
That's right. And when you're talking about glue, behind the scenes, we've kind of made it as a podcast because we have a sponsor this week, and they're sort of going to become a bit of a glue to this podcast going forward. And it's a big sort of step as far as becoming a real podcast. So again, I'm going to be reading ad copy here, so bear with me here, but this is a big step for us. So let's just take a minute.
This is new to us, so
yes, just bear with us. But so today's podcast is brought to you by Grampade. Grampade is the leader in sports drinks specifically targeted to people over the age of 60. Each can of Grampade is custom engineered with a blend of vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that gives seniors the ability to go the distance and feel their strongest. Whether it's playing a vigorous round of pickleball, taking the recumbent bicycle out for a spin, or just yelling at clouds, Grampade is the secret for strength and stamina. World Golf Hall of Fame inductee Bernhard Langer says, Grampade keeps me on the ball and ready to swing for all 18 holes. Listeners to the Huskies Hockey Podcast can get 20% off and a free keychain can opener when you go to grampade.net/order and enter the promo code HUSKY. That's grampade.net/order and enter the promo code HUSKY. Grampade. To stay golden in your golden years, choose Grampade. 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 Alrighty. So now, moving on. So we had Reboyne with Augustana's new program, and we also had, just sort of from the national standpoint, a couple of new head coaches. I believe since we last spoke, a couple of these positions had not been vacant from the last time that we had a podcast. Michigan State and BC, I believe. It was announced that Danton Cole from Michigan State and Jerry York, the legend, announced his retirement at BC. We knew about BU, but all three of those very high-profile positions have been filled in the interim here. Michigan State, as I mentioned, had Danton Cole, a Michigan State alum, who had been previously, they hired him from the U.S. National Team Development Program. He was coaching the U18 team previously. And 5 years of below 500 records led to his departure. So who do they bring in? They bring in a Michigan State alum who was currently coaching at the U.S. National Team Development Program, who was coaching the U18 team. So it can't go any worse than what Dan Cole did. Adam Nightingale is the new head coach for the Spartans there. Again, it's been quite a long time.
What's the definition of insanity?
It's that pop psychology, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
There you go.
It's been a decade plus since Michigan State, a former, power, multiple national titles to their name. It's been 10 years, I believe, since they've even made the NCAA tournament, and for basically the history of the Big Ten Hockey Conference has been last place or second to last, I think, every year. So, and just the timing of firing Cole there was odd. They fired an assistant coach a few weeks before, and it seemed like that was kind of going to be all right, we'll make the assistant coach firing and give you one more year here. but then they ended up firing Cole anyway. Like I said, replacing him with basically the quasi Cole. We'll see how that goes for them. Boston College hires Greg Brown, who had been a longtime assistant under Jerry York. Some speculation there. I mean, there was Mike Cavanaugh as the current UConn coach. Seemed like that was more of York's handpicked guy, but Cavanaugh ended up parlaying the interest that BC showed there into an extension and some more money from UConn. Same thing with Nate Lehman from Providence, who they tried to hire as well, but Brown was kind of the other, Cavanaugh was his right-hand man for a while, so was Brown. So it really was kind of down to those two. Brown he left BC to join David Quinn's staff at the Rangers for a couple of years until that coaching staff was let go. And he spent last year at the UCHL in Dubuque, I believe. But he's back in BC alum, as I mentioned. So not terribly surprising there. And BU as well goes the alum route, hiring Jay Pandolfo, former NHLer. Ending any speculation that David Quinn was going to be rehired there. Sounds like Quinn wants to get an NHL job again, which might be in the offing for him. The big thing I think of these three, I don't know if you have any commentary on any of these hires, but also I think kind of the more surprising news is that Michigan, there hasn't been any news out of Michigan.
Yeah.
With Mel Pearson kind of under a cloud of suspicion with various issues in Michigan's athletic department, and the fact that his contract had expired at the end of April. And at this point, we haven't heard anything as far as they haven't fired him, but they have not extended him, or he's currently not under contract as far as we know. So that's kind of a question mark as well. We still don't know. We're going to hear something because he's either got to be re-signed to a contract or he's got to be let go. And it's kind of getting late in the game. Like usually you get your coaches in place for those Florida meetings at the end of April. So even the fact of these three, BC, BU, and Michigan State hiring their coaches in the last week was a little bit late to begin with there. I guess you're not bound to the early offseason hire. I mean, Western Michigan last year made the coaching change in August, going from Andy Murray to Furschweiler. So plenty of time, I guess, until the next season starts. But still, a situation with Michigan that you want to keep an eye out for, because there's no closure to whatever that story was. And I'm sure we're going to get an answer one way or the other, whether or not he stays or he's replaced. But the fact that he still hasn't been fired, I think would bode well for him. Because if they were going to move on from him, you'd think that have already been announced. But again, it seems like they have a whole legal powder keg there, and that might take a while to settle all out. So certainly keep a pin in that situation. Any comment on those national coaching hires that I mentioned?
No, I mean, the three that they went with, I mean, they were all alums, and they were all, they all didn't have any type of previous head coaching experience, obviously, and did have a lot for the assistants and whatnot. But find that a little bit interesting. Kind of wonder if St. Cloud is also going to go that route with their assistant, if they're just going to go ahead and pick an alum and kind of go for it that way. When you were talking a little bit about the women's team, Molly Enstrom, who's one of the candidates. I mean, she was the assistant, one of the assistants here for the season as well. So, so
she's currently a St. Cloud assistant. Correct.
Yep.
Oh, really? I thought she was was behind Wisconsin's bench, but thank you for clarifying. Maybe she played there. I thought there was a Wisconsin connection with her, but I might be mistaken. But thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, she did play for the Badgers. Yep.
Okay.
So, she was a Patty Casimir finalist.
And I believe the UW Eau Claire guy, I don't believe he's a St. Cloud alum either. It's interesting that St. Cloud has never, for the women's side, they've never hired, I don't believe they've ever hired an alum of the program. And obviously with these three candidates, you wouldn't either, although you have Engstrom with current coaching experience with St. Cloud. Adulski, he would be a first because he's a former head coach at the D1 level. Strand is obviously a D3 coach currently, but their coaches in the past, they haven't hired a retread, so to speak, someone that has already D1 experience. And with the men's assistant job as well, I think that's a good point. That it's nice to have a alum in there, and it's also nice to have a diversity of age in there. You've got Shayak with loads of experience, head coaching experience of his own, and then 2 decades of assistant coaching experience. Which you had a guy like Raboyne previously, and then Oliver, which are guys that are 2, 3, 4 years away from their playing days. I think that's a nice asset to have, is because those guys can relate to the players a little bit better because they're much closer in age. I'm sure Dave Shayak's not on TikTok too much. But,
he's not doing the trends.
He's not trending on. He's not doing the dances on TikTok as much as Oliver clearly is. So
I really want to see Nick Oliver dancing to Lizzo. Actually, is what I want right now.
Truth hurts sometimes. You didn't think that I could pull off a Lizzo reference, but you would be wrong. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they do find someone that's not only a bit younger, but someone that is an alum. Because sometimes you hear that as far as this guy's an alum, and that's why he's got a good chance to be get the head coaching job or whatnot. And some people are kind of, why does that matter so much? But with these, Michigan State, Boston College, BU, those were all alums that they hired, and that seems to be very important factor in getting these kind of head coaching jobs. And it was very surprising that three jobs like that, as far as three nationally, at least traditionally powerhouse. I mean, obviously we mentioned Michigan State.
Yeah, put an asterisk on
doormat for a while.
even their title was what, 07, 06? When was that? That was a
07.
That was a garbage title. I mean, what
that
was
a garbage title?
And that was garbage.
That was a garbage title, and their 66. I mentioned this on a previous podcast. They were under 500 into the Frozen Four, I believe. It's sometime in the mid 60s they won one that was, I think, the worst team to ever win a national title. And it's something to do with how the WCHA qualified teams for the playoffs. Very shady. It would never fly nowadays. I think they won one. I think they've won 3. Maybe it's just those 2. I thought they won one in the mid 80s when they were very good. I know they did, because Gwozdecki was an assistant for them. He's like, in answer to a trivia question, because he's won one as a player, an assistant coach, and a head coach. So I think they won one in the mid 80s, and they were very good. I don't think that one was a fluke, but the 2 of them kind of were. But yeah, since that 07 title was Rick Comley was the head coach, and he retired a few years after that. Their last couple head coaches, they had Anastas and then this Dan Cole. Since those, after Comley left, they have been on a steep decline. Maybe this Nightingale is the guy to bring them back to glory, but doesn't look so hot in East Lansing these days. And I mean, even BC. I mean, BC has kind of, some of their shine has worn off in the last five or so years. St. Cloud beat him in the tournament last year, but that was their only NCAA appearance, I believe, since 2016, 2017. It's been a while. I mean, they were a couple of years there. They were bottom half of the Hockey East, which is a program like BC. You don't expect that. So we'll see if they can kind of rebound as well.
Yeah, it was 86.
Okay.
And yeah, Michigan State that year finished the regular season 39-2. They were the second
Who would have
seed
been
in the West.
Who would have been like their stud then? Who's like their leading scorer, if you can bring that up? I think it's someone that I've heard of. Riveting podcast.
Riveting podcast right here. Mike Donnelly.
That's not who I was.
Jeff Parker.
Hmm.
Don McSween. That was on the all tournament team. They beat Harvard 6-5 in the championship game.
Okay. That was not who I was thinking. I thought they had like a Hobie guy or something that was NHL or something, but obviously not. I wonder if that was Bob Asenza. He was the goaltender. I think they played North Dakota in the title game the year after. Pretty sure Asenza was their goalie. But, and he's an old Winnipeg Jet for all you classic Winnipeg Jets fans. But, yeah, so Michigan State, see if they can finish over 500. That's, I think, the next goal for them. And same with BC and BU. And like I said, keep an eye on that Michigan situation because we don't know how that's going to end until something is announced.
Sometimes I forget what college hockey was like in the 80s.
It's good.
Mike Donnelly finished with 44 games, 59 goals, and 38 assists.
It's not a bad season.
Kevin Miller.
My favorite.
Mitch Messier.
Yeah.
Joe Murphy.
Okay. There's one that I've heard of. And the Millers, I think there is a family of Millers that played at Michigan State, over the 80s and 90s. Not related to Ryan Miller, but there was a group of Millers, I think, for forward that all played at Michigan State. So, now we've got some names. Yeah,
Kevin Miller. Kevin Miller played NHL from 1990 to 97. Or no, to 99.
There you go.
So he had a fairly long career.
Yeah, if you can find, there's a fair amount of NCAA on YouTube, like from that era. It is always kind of fun. The team, like that 87 North Dakota team, was just, check out their numbers. That Tony Herkich.
Oh, the Herkich Circus. Yeah.
He had like 150 points. Like he was like something like he averaged like 3 points a game. Just insane. And that team, if you look at like the scores, like game by game, it's 9-3, 10-2, 7-6. It's just, you think that NHL has, they've been, the scoring has been up this year and across the last few years, but check out scores from like the 80s. It looks like, I don't know, football scores in comparison. Much different era.
Yeah,
sure.
Herkis, 48 games played in that 86-87, 48 games, 46 goals, 70 assists for 116 points.
Okay, so not 3 points. So, but over 2 points a game.
Over 2 points a game.
Which is nuts.
But
so
anyway, enough talking about Michigan State. Gross.
Or North Dakota.
Gross.
Why don't we talk more?
But yes, you were right. Also with 66.
Yes. How about we get back to some St. Cloud State hockey?
Hey, that's
we've got a bit of a idea of the schedule that the Huskies will be playing next year. The conference schedule was released in April. I would say the bullet points there. It looks to be a tough schedule because the two teams that you only play one series against, you've only got Western Michigan at home, so you do not go to Western Michigan, which is fine by me as far as St. Cloud State has not had much success at Lawson Arena over the last few years. And then you're only going to Omaha. Omaha will not be coming to St. Cloud next year. So that means two series against North Dakota, which looks to be bringing in a great recruiting class, and I would assume is going to be at the top of the standings, 1 or 2 next year. And you're also going to be playing Denver in 2 series. Obviously playing Duluth twice, 2 series. That's your designated conference rival. So as far as the top end teams, you're getting those for both a home and away series next year. And so no benefit of only getting Denver for 1 series as they did this year, for instance. so you only the one series against Western and only one series against Omaha. And I'm mentioning that you got the tougher series against Dakota and Denver. That also means you do get 2 series against Miami and 2 series against CC. So I guess you'll take that as far as it balances out a little bit. But you can check out that conference schedule on the NCHC website. It's up there right now. As far as the non-conference, we were under the impression that it's going to be largely, I think almost it's going to be entirely the same opponents that they played in non-conference last year, according to McHatton. We just don't know the exact dates. A couple of them have been trickling in because Mankato and Bemidji have both announced their full schedules. They will be playing Mankato the weekend of October 21st and 22nd. That's a 2-game series at home at St. Cloud. And then a home-and-home with Bemidji the following week, so the 20th, 29th of October. I can't remember which one is at Bemidji and which one's at home. But so those will be the last 2 weekends in October.
Are we going to get a day off of rest in between so we can travel? And
not according to this, because it says the 28th and 29th. It'll be a little less hairy of a drive, I would imagine.
In October versus
October.
Yeah. That's
rather
true.
than the first weekend of January, which wasn't it something like 20 below in Bemidji?
Mm-hmm.
I remember being very, very cold up there when they were broadcasting the game. So we still have we're fairly certain that they're playing the Gophers in a home and home. Fairly certain that they're playing Wisconsin at Wisconsin. And if it is going to be St. Thomas again, I would assume that's going to be another home and home. I would assume 2 of those are going to be in October, and then 1 is going to be in that first weekend of January like they did last year. I don't know. I'm just guessing. You do have 3 weekends in October. You could put them all in October if you wanted. But then I guess because Bemidji was the team to play that January series, someone is going to be, like, do they play the Wisconsin series in January? I don't know. Maybe you play the Gophers then. Who knows? We shall see when those dates are announced. They have not been announced from St. Cloud's side or any of those other teams. And I'm only taking McHatton at his word that those are going to be the opponents. So we know those, and if it is going to be the same non-conference opponents that it was last year, it's kind of flipped around some home and homes and home dates, home series and away series. It should be another tough schedule. I mean, it was, I think, two or 3 in difficulty as far as from the RPI standpoint. Which, as we saw this year, a record that's 4 or 5 games above 500, that can get you into the tournament by playing such a tough schedule. Now you got to win some of these tough games.
Yeah, that's always the X factor. You look at, I was looking at some tweets from Omaha, some of their fans about, their schedule and how, a lot of their non-conference schedule and whatnot are, in a sense, games that are a little bit more of a, pushovers when it comes to the quality. They don't have nearly the panache as, like a Mankato or a Minnesota has in recent years. And a little bit of upset by that because, it's hard to, with the, the pairwise with the non-conference. But, my whole point coming back to that was the problem isn't necessarily that you're playing, those types of teams, because you can still have a really good pairwise by playing those types of teams when you have the conference schedule that you do have. It's the problem that you're losing. So to those types of teams, because those losses hurt you way more than the wins help you. So that's always the toughest because, Omaha is, really frustrating. I would imagine, at least for fans, is that I see them play, in conference games and they look like they hold their own, but, when I see them play non-conference, sometimes they just look lost and listless out there. So I don't know if it's a preparation thing or what, but that's kind of the big thing to remember when it comes to the pairwise is, when you have, built in the strength of schedule like we do, at this point, it's more about not losing against some of those other teams. So it's, having the big games, against the big teams, that's definitely going to help, because those losses aren't going to hurt nearly as much. And you saw that with Duluth, for instance, where they were able to squeak in, probably closer than they would like, but they just had to be above 500. Just making sure that that's the case.
Yeah, they go from having the possibility of being Wisconsin out to getting the 5th overall seed, in the tournament, in a matter of 2 weeks, basically. So they were able to make that big change. And with Omaha, they did as well as they could with that sort of Charmin non-conference last year. I think they only lost 1 game to St. Lawrence, I'm going to say. But, I mean, they weren't playing great competition. What really kind of screwed them last year was the 3 losses to Miami. And
that's true.
So
yep.
It wasn't necessarily the non-conference, but the non-conference didn't do them any favors.
Do them any favors, yeah.
Potentially could have offset some of those Miami losses if they would have played, had a quality non-conference win. And part of it, too, is, I mean, St. Cloud is in a decent advantage as far as there was a natural tendency for the Minnesota teams to want to play non-conference. Mankato and the Gophers, these are kind of established rivals that you want to keep playing in non-conference now that they don't play in the same conference. And it's a benefit because those teams are really, really good now. So, I mean, Mankato and the Gophers were both, top 5, 6 in the pairwise this year. So playing those teams and getting a win in each case does wonders for your pairwise. Whereas Omaha doesn't really have like a natural rival next door that just isn't like we're going to play you every year in non-conference.
Yeah, it's really a lot tougher. It's a lot tougher than
they're kind of in an island there. For a while there, they sort of had a thing with Mankato as far as they would play them every year in non-conferences, going back to like the WCHA days. But they would play them, or when they were in the CCHA. But maybe it was because they were both Mavericks. I don't know exactly what it was, but they would play like Tuesday games during the regular season for a number of years, like late aughts. But but other than that, they haven't really had a opportunity to play a great non-conference foe. So it's interesting how that all shakes out. I mean, if you're in their position, you can run the table as much as you can in the non-conference, but then you just gotta hold serve against the CCs and Miamis, and then maybe pick off a couple of wins against North Dakota and Denver when they did that last year. Yeah. Even though that they've always struggled with Denver, but they ended up beating Denver once last year, and they almost beat them twice. And then they beat North Dakota as well, and I think a couple of overtime games against them too. So they were and swept St. Cloud down in Omaha.
Yeah, that's true.
So
and so and I make it sound also like it's just as easy as calling up Quinnipiac and being like, "Hey, we'll play you guys." Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. Than just schedule better teams.
Right. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, trust us when, we couldn't pay Wisconsin to get into St. Cloud and play at St. Cloud for many, many years. I'm still shocked that Granado said, "Yeah, we'll come to St. Cloud."
Yeah.
And so
maybe that was just a special COVID thing.
Well, and that was the weekend that Bemidji is going to be on the schedule for that weekend. A lot of times it's the same weekend as when you're making these scheduling arrangements with teams. So something about the fact that Bemidji is now playing in October makes me curious as to maybe Wisconsin's like, you know what, we don't need to play you again. We got our ass kicked last year by you guys, so we don't want that to happen again. Something about that Bemidji being in that same weekend that Wisconsin was last year makes me a little curious as to whether Wisconsin's going to live up to its end of the bargain. But we shall see, I suppose. Couple of other items. Wanted to mention if you had any take on Dryden McKay. News coming out that as a part of the he was apparently under consideration to play on the Olympics. And as a part of that process, he was required to take some drug tests for steroids and all that kind of stuff. This was at the kind of tail end of January, and turned out at that point he had tested positive very trace amounts of a supplement that contained, according to his story, that contained a supplement or a substance, a banned substance. He was not aware that this substance was in the supplement. As it turned out, he had to miss a weekend for Mankato. He was not allowed to play in a series at like Northern Michigan or something. Maybe it was Lake State or something like that. But then, as it turned out, the doping agency, I don't know if that disqualified him from the Olympics or if the Olympics passed on him for other reasons. But the agreement they had was they were going to shelve this story until after the season. And they ended up suspending him for 6 months. So he cannot perform, cannot play for anybody for 6 months. Now, and he was since signed by Toronto in the NHL, and he's going to be able to play with their AHL team. I mean, the suspension took effect, I believe, the week after the Frozen Four. So that means the suspension will expire in mid-October, which is right around the time that the season will start, AHL season at least. So his career is likely not going to be totally affected by this. I'm just surprised. I mean, from my perspective, I'm fairly, even with steroids and stuff, I'm not a huge like kick him out of the game. And then you have the whole kind of the supplement. It's a kind of a Wild West situation with supplements, how they're manufactured. You don't know exactly how these products are labeled. I take him at his word for the fact that he was unaware that he was taking. I don't believe he was trying to take something to give it an advantage. It's pretty tough to do that as a goalie anyway. I'm struggling to figure out how a steroid, a performance-enhancing drug, would really affect a goaltender. I can see that more from like a skater, getting some more speed or keeping up with endurance. But as a goaltender, I'm struggling to find out how that would really give you much advantage. And I'm just more surprised at the fact that this story was just so buried. Because if the story would have come out, he would not have won the Hobey Baker. I don't. And so, because the story was buried until the Hobey was awarded, I think that enabled him to get to receive the Hobey. And so I'm just more interested that's the more interesting part of the story, is just that they were able to keep the story under wraps because, like I said, he was gone for that weekend. And, we're not monitoring Mankato's schedule from week to week, but if we were the Mavericks hockey podcast, I'm sure that would have raised eyebrows at that time. Like, why didn't he play that weekend? Because he plays every game. It's not like even a Castor situation where the backup goalie is getting 5 games a year. Like, he's playing every minute of every game. And so I'm surprised that didn't raise eyebrows beyond Mankato or the CCHA at that point. And then I'm just surprised that how the process played out. And again, I'm glad. Like I said, I would have voted for him as the Hobey this year. Hobey, the committee came out afterwards and said, we're not stripping him of the award, which I think is the right move. But it's just one of those things that it is going to be on his Wikipedia page from now on. And there's going to be a small faction, let's hope, very small, of people that when they bring up his name, this is going to be attached to him. Like I said, I feel bad for his situation, because I don't think it was I don't think it really made much of a difference as far as that was the reason that he played so well. And I don't think he was intending on cheating. Do you have any thoughts on that situation? Because it is kind of an unprecedented story in college hockey. The Hobie Baker winner suspended for 6 months for a doping violation.
Yeah. I think it's just really unfortunate because in reading the story, he got he was taking the supplement, which already isn't regulated by any reputable like food and drink. Supplements you can use that name incredibly loosely, and you don't really know what's in them. But McKay was taking one to boost his immune system because he was worried about COVID. And apparently it included a trace amount of something that's on the USADA, United States, what is it? I hear it all
anti-doping.
United States Anti-Doping Agency. Yes. I hear that all the time because my wife's a big figure skating fan. So the USADA runs that show. And there was even a U.S. pairs figure skater who got caught or got, threw the 6-month ban hammer at her because it was trace amount in her makeup. It was some kind of substance that was in the makeup. So it's just, it was that, just kind of, this immune booster. They were able to get a sealed sample sent also to USADA just to, which is why the NCAA ended up clearing them, because it wasn't like it was masking anything. Is like, this is what I took. It's in here. It's such a minute amount, and it really didn't have any effect on any of his skill or anything along those lines. So, it's, so as far as the United States Anti-Doping Agency, that 6-month ban is in effect. That's not going to really do anything, I don't think. And I think it's just how everything is lined up. It's like, whatever. But I bet if he would appeal it, it would probably get overturned. Just by some of the other aspects that kind of go into it. But I think he just wants to turn this page and be like, whatever, right. I just want to get done with it.
No, it makes you wonder, like, if they could have, put the hammer down back then in January or February, and then he would have missed the rest of Mankato's season. And like I said, definitely would not have won the Hobie then if he was suspended for the last 3 months.
Yeah, and that's where I think having that sealed sample sent over and tested probably saved him. Whereas otherwise, it's a little bit harder to prove that you got it from that sample or you got it from that particular. You could have got it from anywhere, just to kind of prove it that way. So
you think if you're able to prove it though, then why is he even getting a 6-month suspension? I mean, they must buy that rationale to the extent that they let him participate for the last 3 months of the season, because it sounds like they were aware of this back in January or February. And I know that there's an appeals process. So I'm sure that the drug in question was being tested, but they would have known about this before it was announced, well before it was announced. So it's and I take a vitamin D supplement too. Who knows exactly what goes all into that? So. You
don't get enough sun in Arizona?
Well, not so much anymore, but I guess it's just habit that I take it now, maybe. But yeah, maybe I would test positive for a doping violation based on the Safeway supermarket vitamins.
I just played pickleball with my wife today. If I am guilty of any type of doping from like my blood pressure medication, I would be very furious that my doping isn't working because I am completely out of shape. And the pickleball's a workout.
Pickleball is a workout, and if that's not working, then as we mentioned before, there is that Grampade.
That Grampade, that's what I should actually just start chugging. What's in that? Yeah. Is that going to have some
I just read the
Austrian.
copy. They were very general with their terms. I don't write the
No,
copy.
I'm excited for my samples. I will say that. So
that's right. And your free keychain can opener.
Keychain can opener, and you said what was that? 20% off, Grampy?
20% off. I don't want to read the whole thing again, but you can go back and yeah.
I'm just reminding our listeners here of the great deal on Grampade. So
it is a great deal. I mean, yeah, like I said, we're getting our samples pretty soon here, so we'll be able to have I mean, it's tough though because we're not really in the target demo, so to speak. But I'm sure that those
except I'm a pickleball enthusiast. So
that's right. And I like to yell at clouds. So there is that.
I think this podcast was based on us yelling at clouds.
Yes, capital C cloud in this case.
Yeah.
But yeah, you had actually some you had some rule change chatter. The coaches were getting, as mentioned, getting together in Florida for their annual meetings, and every few years NCAA will have a set of rule changes. Nothing has been made official yet, but it's kind of nice to just have an idea of what they're talking about. And you kind of went through a whole laundry list before the podcast. You're going to just highlight some of the more major potential rule changes. And yeah, it's always nice because we've complained a fair amount about certain rules, especially regarding overtime, and it sounds like they're talking about some of these. So why don't you recap some of these potential, and like I said, nothing is official yet, but these are what is on the docket for potential rules. Yeah. So why don't you run them down for us?
All right. Tom Maluski from the Wisconsin Badgers beat writer had a list of them in late April. Overtime was one of them. Basically, I think they were just looking at the bean pot or just special tournaments that they removed the 20-minute 5-on-5 in special cases this last season or this last couple seasons, and they might want to revisit it because the bean pot is sacred or whatever. I don't know. But I think it just adds some more confusion when it comes to overtime, and I cannot keep hearing Jim Rich misguide us on what overtime is. So I just want uniformity some way or another.
That should be a rule change in itself. Just make sure to give a list of these rule changes to Jim Rich directly. I think that would be a plus.
Yep, exactly. Coaches' challenges basically put more than a timeout on the line, and they probably want to go to the NHL system, possibly a delay a game penalty if you are wrong on a challenge. Defining the end of the game. When is a game over? Which obviously with Minnesota State's first game-winning goal in the CCHA, when is that game over with all of that, calling people back onto the ice, that whole kerfuffle there. That was really interesting, and I bet a little of that stems also from the first round of the tournament when it was Notre Dame against North Dakota. About what ends the game there, because the horn and the light and the game clock were all different times. So
it's always interesting the rule changes that will be made or at least discussed based on like one game or one scenario. Like the Wisconsin rule that we've discussed about being under 500, that would disqualify you from being an at-large team in the NCAAs. I know that there was I think the whole reviewing offsides came into play because of like a UMass BC game from about 5 years ago or so. And so this one would be sort of the Mankato rule, whereas like when, at least in this case, like the Notre Dame, North Dakota game was a little different in that nobody had actually, the official hadn't left the building.
Left the building yet.
In that case, this one would be
the
more
fans
like
haven't left the building, and
that, 20 minutes passed and the refs have showered up. Maybe at that point the game is over. Once the shower nozzle is turned,
then on or off,
the game is officially over. You gotta put it in black and white. You
Yep.
just have to be very clear in your rule. But yeah, this could be one of those situations that if that never happened, we would not be talking about that right now.
There's a YouTube channel that I follow, and of course I'm blanking on it right now. But they have a section, Sports Nation, and I think they got a section they called Weird Rules, and they talk about weird rules that happened or why are some weird rules that seem weird in the rule book, like what led up to that. And I feel like this would be one instance where they'll have a little video about it, and I will be like, oh, I remember when I was at a game watching on the Twitter. Lesser penalties for hitting from behind and head contact. Basically, there have been suggestions that referees should have the option to call minor penalties when a player who is hit puts themselves into a vulnerable position. That's one thing that I always feel like I have to correct people on Twitter, is that there isn't but he turned his back out when it comes to somebody. The onus is on the person giving the hit. And even if the player receiving the hit turns his back and it's magically from behind, that's a major penalty in college hockey, no matter what. This would kind of look at it a little bit differently and say it's not necessarily the guy who's hitting his fault and not the intent of the rule, and give him a little bit lesser of a sentence for that.
Yeah, or at least like not having an automatic DQ or 5 minute, even a 5 minute major. I'm wondering if this rule was spurred by the Duluth versus Michigan Tech game in the NCAAs, where Tech's best player was ejected from the game for checking from behind about 3 minutes into the game.
Oh, that's right.
If you remember that?
Yeah.
Which I thought was a pretty ticky-tack call. So I'm wondering if that's the impetus.
That's the Michigan Tech rule.
Yeah, there you go.
So... and then face-offs, just going through with face-offs. Now we've got the warning and a penalty if it's still a face-off violation. But now they're going to review how that process is compared to the old process of kicking out the old player and seeing what basically is like, which one do we like better? Which one should we choose? So,
yeah, and so these rule changes, like I said, they'll be made permanent these aren't the only things that they're talking about. And
yeah, there's a whole list of 10 other ones that we can kind of go through. But in the interest of time, all I would say is the one that I really want is onside if the skate is above the blue line. We're okay with it. But I hope they make that change.
If there's some compelling ones when they do become official, we'll be sure to bring those up and
debate it.
Yeah, was it last year and then even coming into this year, I was unsure of what the overtime format was.
I still am unsure.
Exactly how
Jim Rich is unsure.
Affects. Yeah, he's definitely out to lunch for that. But, and so I'm excited to see if they do change that. I really do hope they do. Or at least from the pairwise implications of overtime. So it'd be nice to know how they handle that. So once that is become official, we'll be sure to again highlight the rule changes that were made. We do have, we mentioned the new programs in Stonehill and Lindenwood becoming official. We also have Illinois announcing that they are definitely not going to be going forward with D1 hockey. That seemed to be something that was right on the doorstep right before COVID hit. They're kind of chalking up the failure of them announcing a D1 move to COVID. Lack of funding. It's frustrating when we were a big reason is when Big Ten announced that they were splitting off and creating their own hockey conference. A lot of the rationale was that this will encourage other Big Ten programs that currently don't have hockey, that they'll be able to, because they have a built-in conference that they can join. They don't have to go through the many years process that teams like Arizona State are going through, is trying to find a conference. Well, because we have the infrastructure already in place, we can have Iowa and Illinois and Maryland. They'll in no time they'll join the Big Ten Hockey Conference, and we're into the 10th year now of the Big Ten Hockey Conference, and the only team that they've added is Notre Dame, which isn't a member of the Big Ten for anything else. So I think that's kind of, you got to chalk that up at, partly a failure of the conference of being unable to attract some of their other, regular members to join into the hockey pool. So that's frustrating there. And like I said, we have those other, Lindenwood, Stonehill, the Alaska Anchorage coming back for this coming year. We did have an idea of, I know you had mentioned doing like if we were the commissioner of NCAA hockey, any sort of realignment. That's a big kind of topic, and we had plenty to talk about this month, so maybe we should shove that off again.
That might be like a July podcast.
That could be a July or August podcast, but talking about some of these newcomers, I saw Lindenwood was added to UND's schedule for next year, so you're going to be seeing them and facing off against some NCHC teams, at least one of them. But that's like Augustana. That's kind of an interesting one for me because it's not only just a new college, but a new state that has NCAA hockey because they're in the St. Louis suburbs. Not sure the exact town. Maybe it is Lindenwood. I don't know. I don't think that's the town, but it's somewhere in Missouri.
St. Charles.
St. Charles. Okay, so that's in the St. Louis area in Missouri, and so it's exciting to get another state represented in NCAA hockey, and it'll be interesting to know where they end up. And they're a team that has had a very good run as a club team. Won a couple of national titles at the club level, and then, like I said, they have a newish facility, a facility that will be hosting a NCAA regional in a few years. It's kind of the Blues practice facility there in St. Louis or suburban St. Louis. So it seems like they have a lot of things going for them. Obviously, they don't have the conference home yet, but it seems like they're in a decent position to, become a viable program. Whereas a program like Stonehill, I couldn't tell you much about them other than they're in the Boston suburbs. There's a ton of teams in that area. They're probably not going to be struggling for recruits. And I think their path to getting into a conference, either Atlantic Hockey or is rumors that Atlantic Hockey could split off. I mean, they're getting to the point where what do you do with Long Island as well? It's potential that you could have 2 6 or 7 or 8 team leagues form out east, which would add another automatic qualifier for the tournament. Like I said before, as far as realignment goes, I do think that there's another set of dominoes that's going to fall with more teams announcing moves to D1. That's gonna accelerate that process. So, maybe we'll do that sort of speculation of like there's also, it's like the what realistically could happen, and then there's the what would we do if we're trying to be fun and throw realism out the window. There's that sort of way that we could do that as well. And so in one of these off-season podcasts, I think that those are the kind of topics that we'll get into. But I think that is enough for now. We don't have any questions from our loyal fan base?
Nope, no questions.
Is that correct?
Nope.
Well, if that's a shame, we usually have. I don't know. We should do a welfare check on Dan Jacobson. We're at least pretty confident. We usually get at least one from Dan. So I hope you're doing well. But I know summer schedules, people are getting out and weather's nice now. So hopefully you're enjoying the summer or the early part of it, I guess, so far. But that'll if you do
judging by Dan's Twitter feed here, it looks like he checked in a few times on Untapped. So I'm pretty sure he was day drinking today. So
all right. well, that's I'll grant you the excuse there.
There you go.
Sounds like you were having fun, but in the future, if you do have questions or comments, you can send them over to Weldie at
More Clappers, MOAR Clappers, More Clappers.
And you can also send an email to me at Huskies Hockey Podcast at gmail.com. Also, any sort of advertising inquiries can be directed to the email or to Weldie's Twitter account. He can forward that to me. Excited to have Grandpate on board. And we appreciate the support. That'll do it for this week, unless you have anything else. Any final words, Mr. Weldie?
No, I'm looking forward to our realignment discussion. Sometime in the next couple months. And then maybe, if we maybe a little bit of a deeper dive into some commits, or if we know of some freshmen that are going to be coming in, maybe we could do like a little bit of a mini scouting report where we can go into a little bit. So those are some ideas that I'm kind of working on here. I do want to say, if we do a new realignment, or I wouldn't say like if college hockey goes that route where they do more conferences and everything, I gotta think they raise it from 6 teams to 8 for the minimum for the automatic qualifier. I don't think 6 teams is going to be enough with the addition of so many different colleges, and they're coming back of other colleges as well that took some time off, which, not gonna lie, is a little bit of a surprise considering when the wave of realignment happened in the early teens. We didn't really, think this many teams would still be saved. And so I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting. But I've got already kind of a group of what to do with some of these other ones. And I will say the NCHC looks a lot different in my really? Blueprint. So a little bit of a tease.
I am intrigued. I like that bumping it up to 8 teams is a nice little subtle, passive-aggressive, Minnesota nice way to say to the Big Ten, you got to add another team.
Right.
And it ain't going to be Illinois.
It's not going to be Illinois, as much as that one Twitter account who has been trying to sell his handle for about, 10 years have said Illinois is on the cusp.
Yeah, well, it's maybe now they make the announcement. Maybe it was just a ruse.
Yeah, right, exactly.
We're going to cancel it out, but then we're going to actually go for it. But yeah, that sounds like a fun episode for the summer. So tune in next time. Who knows? Maybe we got a new AD to talk about. Maybe we got a new assistant coach to talk about.
New women's coach
to talk about. As for our history, that'll probably be announced tomorrow. All 3 of those things.
All 3 of them will come down right now.
So, barring an emergency podcast addendum, like we did for the Bassey commit, I guess we'll talk to you in a month. Until then, go Huskies. Woo!